most of them never recognize they've fallen into. It's the trap of being, or believing yourself to be, the smartest person in the room. And I want to suggest to you that this is one of the most dangerous positions you can find yourself in, though not for the reasons you might think. Now, when I say dangerous, I don't mean dangerous in the sense that something terrible is going to happen to you. I mean dangerous in a much more subtle and insidious way. I mean dangerous to your growth, to your understanding, to your very capacity to perceive reality as it actually is. Because the moment you become convinced that you're the most intelligent person in any given situation, something very peculiar happens. You stop learning, and the moment you stop learning, you begin dying intellectually, even if you don't realize it. Let me explain what I mean. Intelligence, as we commonly understand it, is really a kind of pattern recognition. It's the ability to see connections, to understand systems, to solve problems, to think abstractly. And when you're genuinely more intelligent than the people around you, you start to notice something. You can see things they can't see. You can predict outcomes they don't anticipate. You understand implications that sail right over their heads. And this creates a very seductive illusion. The illusion is this, that because you can think more quickly, more abstractly, more systematically than others, you therefore have nothing to learn from them. You begin to see other people as less than, as inferior, as intellectual children who need you to explain things to them. And once you've adopted this position, once you've placed yourself above others in this way, you've created a prison for yourself that's very difficult to escape. Here's what happens. When you believe you're the smartest person in the room, you stop really listening to what others are saying. Oh, you might appear to listen. You might nod politely, wait for your turn to speak, but you're not actually taking in what they're saying with any genuine openness. Instead, you're already formulating your response, already identifying the flaws in their thinking, already preparing to demonstrate your superior understanding. You've turned conversation into a competition that you must win. And in doing so, you miss something absolutely crucial. You miss the fact that intelligence, as valuable as it is, represents only one way of knowing the world. There are other kinds of knowledge, other kinds of wisdom, that have nothing to do with what we conventionally call intelligence. There's the wisdom that comes from lived experience. There's the insight that comes from emotional depth. There's the understanding that comes from paying attention to things that intellectual analysis tends to overlook. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're a brilliant engineer, someone who can design complex systems, someone who understands mathematics and physics at a very high level. You find yourself in a conversation with, let's say, a gardener, someone who has spent their life working with plants and soil. Now, if you're trapped in the belief that you're the smartest person in the room, you might look at this gardener and think, what could this person possibly teach me? I understand biology, chemistry, the scientific principles behind plant growth. But here's what you miss. The gardener knows things that cannot be learned from books, things that come only from thousands of hours of direct observation, of trial and error, of intimate contact with living processes. The gardener knows how this particular soil responds to rain, how that specific plant behaves in different seasons, what the subtle signs of disease look like before they become obvious. This is a kind of knowledge that your intellectual brilliance cannot give you, no matter how high your measured intelligence might be. And if you dismiss this knowledge because it doesn't come in the form of abstract principles and systematic analysis, you've just demonstrated not your intelligence, but your ignorance. You've confused one kind of knowing with all knowing. You've mistaken the map for the territory. And this is the great danger of believing you're the smartest person in the room. It makes you stupid in ways you cannot see. Now, let's go deeper into this. There's another aspect to this trap that's even more subtle. When you're constantly the most intelligent person in your environment, you stop being challenged. And without challenge, without resistance, your thinking becomes lazy. It's like a muscle that's never exercised. You develop certain patterns of thought, certain ways of approaching problems, and because no one around you can effectively question these patterns, they become rigid. They become dogma, even though you might pride yourself on being open-minded and rational. You see, intelligence without humility is just elaborate foolishness, and humility cannot exist when you're convinced of your intellectual superiority. True humility comes from recognizing that no matter how much you know, it's vanishingly small compared to what you don't know. It comes from understanding that every person you meet knows something you don't, has experienced something you haven't, sees the world from an angle that's invisible to you. The smartest people I've ever known, the truly wise ones, had this remarkable quality. They could talk to anyone and find something interesting, something valuable, something to learn. They didn't approach conversations as opportunities to display their intelligence. They approached them as opportunities to discover something new. And because of this openness, because of this genuine curiosity about other people's perspectives, they continued to grow and evolve throughout their entire lives. But the person who's trapped in being the smartest person in the room, they stop growing. They might accumulate more information, but they don't develop genuine wisdom. They become, in a sense, intellectually frozen. They keep applying the same patterns of thought, the same frameworks of analysis to every new situation, and because no one challenges them effectively, they never discover the limitations of these patterns. Here's another danger that's worth exploring. When you're the smartest person in the room, you tend to become isolated. Not physically isolated, necessarily, but psychologically isolated. Because you've separated yourself from others through your sense of intellectual superiority, you can no longer form genuine connections with them. You relate to them as a teacher relates to students, as an expert relates to novices, but not as one human being relates to another. And this isolation has consequences. You start to live in your head, in your abstractions, in your theories and ideas. You lose touch with the messy, complicated, ambiguous reality of actual human experience. You become, paradoxically, less intelligent about the things that matter most, the things that make life worth living: relationships, meaning, purpose, love, connection. I've seen this happen to extremely intelligent people. They can analyze complex systems, solve intricate problems, understand abstract concepts that most people can't even comprehend. But they're absolutely clueless about basic human nature. They don't understand why people do what they do. They're constantly surprised by emotional reactions that seem obvious to everyone else. They've developed one part of their intelligence to such a high degree that other parts have atrophied. And here's the irony. The more intelligent you are, the more elaborate the justifications you can create for your blind spots. You can construct entire philosophical systems to explain why your weaknesses aren't really weaknesses, why your limitations aren't really limitations. You can rationalize your isolation, your disconnection, your inability to learn from others. You can convince yourself that you're not trapped. You're just surrounded by people who don't understand you. But this is delusion of the highest order. And it's a delusion that intelligence itself enables. This is why I say that being the smartest person in the room is dangerous. It's not dangerous because other people will resent you, though they might. It's not dangerous because you'll be lonely, though you probably will be. It's dangerous because it creates a particular kind of blindness, a blindness to your own blindness. Now, let me address something that might be troubling some of you as you listen to this. You might be thinking, but what if I really am more intelligent than the people around me? What if this isn't arrogance, but simply an accurate assessment of reality? Should I pretend to be less intelligent than I am? And the answer is no, of course not. I'm not suggesting that you deny your intelligence or pretend to be something you're not. What I'm suggesting is something much more radical. I'm suggesting that you question the very framework that divides people into more intelligent and less intelligent, smartest and dumbest. I'm suggesting that this framework itself might be the problem. You see, when we talk about someone being the smartest person in the room, we're assuming that intelligence is a single, measurable quality that varies from person to person along a simple scale. But this is a gross oversimplification. Intelligence is not one thing, it's many things. There's analytical intelligence, emotional intelligence, creative intelligence, practical intelligence, social intelligence, bodily intelligence, and forms of intelligence we probably don't even have names for yet. When you recognize this, when you truly understand that intelligence is multidimensional and context dependent, the whole idea of being the smartest person in the room starts to dissolve. You might be more analytically intelligent than others in the room, but someone else might be more emotionally intelligent. Someone else might have a better practical understanding of how to get things done. Someone else might be more creative, more intuitive, more attuned to subtle social dynamics. And here's what's really interesting. The person who recognizes this, who can appreciate different forms of intelligence, who can learn from people regardless of their scores on standardized tests, this person becomes more intelligent in a way that transcends conventional measures. They become wise. And wisdom, I would suggest, is what intelligence looks like when it's combined with humility, openness, and genuine curiosity about the world. Let me tell you about the greatest danger of all in being the smartest person in the room. It's that you stop asking questions. And the moment you stop asking questions, the moment you think you have everything figured out, you've lost the very thing that makes intelligence valuable in the first place. You've lost your beginner's mind, your capacity for wonder, your ability to be surprised by reality. Children are natural learners because they're constantly asking questions. They haven't yet developed the ego investment in being right, in appearing smart, in maintaining a consistent image of themselves as knowledgeable. They can say, "I don't know," without shame. They can admit confusion without embarrassment. They can change their minds without feeling like they've lost some essential part of themselves. But as we get older, and especially if we're praised for being intelligent, we start to identify with our knowledge, with our ability to understand things quickly, with our capacity to appear smart in front of others. And this identification becomes a trap. We can no longer afford to not know, to be confused, to be wrong, because these states threaten our sense of who we are. So we stop asking genuine questions. We ask rhetorical questions designed to display our knowledge. We ask leading questions designed to guide people to the conclusions we've already reached. But we don't ask the kind of open, authentic questions that might actually lead to discovering something we didn't already know. And in losing the ability to ask genuine questions, we lose the ability to learn in any meaningful way. Think about this carefully. If you're in a room full of people and you believe you're the smartest one there, what motivation do you have to ask them questions? You already know more than they do, or so you think. So instead of asking and listening, you tell and explain. You turn every conversation into a lecture. And while you might be correct in your explanations, while you might indeed have superior understanding of certain topics, you're not growing. You're just repeating what you already know. But the person who asks genuine questions, who approaches each conversation with curiosity rather than superiority, who can say, "I don't understand, tell me more," this person is learning constantly. They're growing, evolving, expanding their understanding of the world. And over time, regardless of their starting point, they become wiser than the person who knew more to begin with but stopped learning. There's a Zen saying that's relevant here. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. When you're the expert, when you're the smartest person in the room, you approach situations with a fixed framework of understanding. You already know how things work, what the answers are, what the right approach is. But the beginner, precisely because they don't know, is open to possibilities that the expert can't even see. This is why some of the greatest breakthroughs in various fields come from outsiders, from people who aren't the recognized experts, who aren't the smartest people in the room by conventional measures. They ask different questions because they're not constrained by the accepted wisdom. They see different possibilities because they're not trapped in the established patterns of thought. Their supposed intellectual inferiority turns out to be a kind of freedom. Now, I want to address something that might seem contradictory. I'm not suggesting that intelligence doesn't matter, or that all perspectives are equally valid, or that we should pretend that differences in analytical ability don't exist. What I'm suggesting is something more nuanced. I'm suggesting that the value of intelligence is not in separating yourself from others, not in establishing intellectual hierarchy, but in understanding and engaging with reality more fully. And here's the paradox. The more you use your intelligence to separate yourself from others, to establish your superiority, the less effectively your intelligence actually functions. Because intelligence at its best is a tool for connection, for understanding, for seeing how things relate to each other. When you use it instead as a weapon, as a means of maintaining distance between yourself and others, you're perverting its very nature. The truly intelligent person recognizes that they need other people, not despite their intelligence, but because of it. They understand that their thinking is shaped by their particular background, their particular experiences, their particular biases and blind spots. They understand that other people, precisely because they're different, precisely because they see the world from different angles, offer something valuable. They offer correction, challenge, alternative perspectives, pieces of the puzzle that the intelligent person cannot see on their own. This is why the smartest move an intelligent person can make is to deliberately place themselves in situations where they're not the smartest person in the room. To seek out people who know more, who understand better, who can challenge their thinking and expose their assumptions. This takes courage because it means risking looking foolish, risking having your cherished beliefs questioned, risking the discomfort of genuine intellectual challenge. But this discomfort is where growth happens. When you're comfortable, when you're unchallenged, when everyone around you is nodding along with everything you say, you're not growing. You're stagnating. You might feel good, you might feel validated, but you're not developing. You're just reinforcing what you already think. Let me tell you something else about being the smartest person in the room. It's boring. It's intellectually stultifying. If you're genuinely intelligent, genuinely curious, genuinely interested in ideas and understanding, being surrounded by people who can't challenge you is like being a tennis player who only plays against opponents you can easily defeat. You might win every game, but you're not improving your game. You're actually getting worse because you're not being pushed, not being tested, not being forced to develop new strategies and skills. The intelligent person who seeks out intellectual challenge, who deliberately places themselves in situations where they might be wrong, where they might not have the answer, where they might have to struggle to understand, this person continues to develop throughout their life. They remain flexible, adaptable, open to new ideas. They don't calcify into fixed patterns of thought. And here's something that might surprise you. The people who are most secure in their intelligence are often the most willing to admit when they don't know something, when they're confused, when they need help understanding. They're not threatened by their lack of knowledge in certain areas because their sense of self isn't dependent on always being right, always being the smartest, always having the answer. But the person who's insecure about their intelligence, who's constantly trying to prove how smart they are, who can't admit to not knowing something, this person is trapped. They're trapped in a performance, a constant act of demonstrating their intelligence to themselves and others. And this performance prevents genuine learning, genuine growth, genuine understanding. So what's the alternative? How do you avoid the trap of being the smartest person in the room? The answer is surprisingly simple, though not easy. You cultivate what Zen Buddhism calls don't know mind. You approach each situation, each person, each conversation with genuine openness to learning something new. You ask real questions. You listen with the intention of understanding, not with the intention of formulating your response. You allow yourself to be changed by what you hear, rather than filtering everything through your existing framework of understanding. You recognize that every person you meet, regardless of their measured intelligence, regardless of their education level, regardless of their social status, has something to teach you. It might not be what you expect. It might not be in the form of abstract ideas or systematic analysis. But if you're paying attention, if you're genuinely open, you'll find it. And perhaps most importantly, you hold your own intelligence lightly. You don't identify with it. You don't make it the centerpiece of your identity. You recognize it as a tool, a useful tool, certainly, but just a tool. It's not who you are. It's something you can use to engage with the world more effectively, but it's not an inherent measure of your worth as a human being. When you do this, when you step out of the trap of needing to be the smartest person in the room, something wonderful happens. You become free, free to learn from anyone, free to be wrong, free to change your mind, free to say, I don't know, free to be genuinely curious about other people's perspectives. And in this freedom, you discover something paradoxical. You discover that by giving up the need to be the smartest person in the room, you actually become wiser, not more intelligent in the conventional sense, perhaps, but wiser. You develop a more nuanced, more complete, more realistic understanding of the world. You see things you couldn't see before. You understand things you couldn't understand before. You connect with people in ways that weren't possible before. And you realize, finally, that the real danger of being the smartest person in the room wasn't that people would resent you or that you'd be lonely, though both of those things might be true. The real danger was that you'd stop growing. You'd stop evolving. You'd become frozen in a particular pattern of thought, a particular way of seeing the world, and you'd miss the incredible richness and complexity of reality that's always available to those who approach life with genuine humility and curiosity. So here's my invitation to you. If you find yourself in situations where you're the smartest person in the room, change rooms. Find people who challenge you, who know things you don't know, who see things you don't see. And when you can't change rooms, change your attitude. Approach everyone you meet as a potential teacher. Ask genuine questions. Listen with real openness. Allow yourself to be surprised, to be confused, to not know. This is how you escape the trap.